Hey everyone, welcome to the Catholicpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Fisher. Today's question before we dive in with our guest is, have you ever done Exodus 90 before and what were your experiences with it? Tweet me, let me know, at Mitchell J. Fisher. Without further ado, I'm going to bring in our guest, who is actually the CEO and founder of Exodus 90, Jamie Baxter. Jamie, how are you?
Hey, Mitch.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, it's going well. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. Super excited to have you on. I know you're a busy guy, so really do appreciate it. Why don't we go ahead and I'd love just for you to introduce yourself to the listeners as who you are and what you do.
Awesome. Yeah, Mitch, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I know a couple friends have been on the show, so I was grateful for the invite. Yeah, so I'm Jamie Baxter. I live in Indiana, in the north suburbs of Indianapolis. I'm from around here as well. But yeah, founder, CEO of Exodus 90, and really the place that we feel very called to serve is the formation of men, and specifically helping men to confront the different pharaohs and idols that find their way, into our hearts, and we all have them, from time to time. Even really good men do, and we just try to help men to take up the ancient path, provided by ultimately Christ and the church, that leads to greater freedom and ultimately to love. It's freedom is the foundation of love, and so we feel just really called to help men find greater interior freedom so that they can respond more generously to the calls and claims of God upon their lives. So that's what we're about.
That's beautiful. Yeah. How did you ever see yourself doing this? Like, were you an entrepreneur at heart even before like Exodus 90, or take me back to like the early days of you getting into starting this?
Yeah, so when I was young, I was super entrepreneurial, but at the same time, I've always been a very quiet person. Growing up, I was not popular, and I was just pretty reserved. My father and my mom, but my dad especially, has just had a huge impact upon my faith. Really, he had a conversion when I was a boy, and really just changed our family, and helped me to know through his example that the life of a man is centered and should be centered on growing your relationship with Christ, and ultimately really becoming open to why it is that we're here, why it is that we were thought out of nothing for the gift of life. So um anyway, yeah, I would be, there'd be, so I was big into garage sailing, trading cards, all this kinds of stuff. But ultimately, I would discern that, I really needed to discern the priesthood. So I went to seminary at the age of 18. I was there for a meaningful amount of time too. I was there for 6 years.
Wow.
And before I really realized that God had called me out into the world, so just from Vatican II, we know that, the priests exist to, obviously, I mean, well, for many reasons, but in terms of kind of an orientation, their job is really to sanctify the laity, and the laity are called to, the documents talk about kind of ordering the temporal world onto the pattern of Christ. And that's just
Mm,
a mission that's always just really resonated with me, about kind of being out in the world, in its mess, in its fallenness, in its secularism, and trying to bend it back
yeah.
little by little into the mold of the gospel. So um, anyway, did I ever see, I really didn't see this happening. For there was a long time I thought I would be a priest. Um, but once I made that discernment, the calling of God upon me for this became very, very clear. And so I don't know, when people ask about, did I always think that Exodus would become this? It's not really, but I really felt called to serve in this space and in this place, and just even when there was nothing to show for it for a very long time. I mean, there was really 3 years where it's just a total slog. But the call of God was really very clear, and He was very simple with me,
Yeah.
and just kept going.
Wow. That's really neat. So 6 years in seminary, did you like were you already kind of feeling called to do this while in seminary, or was it after you left seminary that you started to get this idea?
Yeah, so I was a part of a small group of seminarians, like a fraternity, that was just really passionate about men's formation. So we had started a Catholic men's blog in the early days of blogs, okay, and we would end up launching Exodus out of this too. And so really, there was a group of us that were kind of started what were the first Exodus 90 fraternities in the seminary. And when I discerned out, it was like, okay, maybe some of this stuff will apply, out in the world. And there was not a long-term vision for it, or anything like that. But I knew how blessed I had been. So many of my friends had been of these kind of first Exodus groups. And so I just started working, and I've been working on it every day, almost 9 years since, of just trying to improve, constantly iterate, tear down, build back up.
Yeah.
And just listen to the feedback of the men that enter into our work, so that we can more faithfully serve the freedom of these men.
Wow. Well, so you said the first 3 years were kind of like a slog. Take me into those 3 years. Like, what were some of the challenges you faced? And how did you get to the point where you are now, where it's like, a lot of Exodus 90 is, I would say, pretty well known amongst Catholic men. How did you get to this point?
Yeah, so I thought we were maybe better well known than we are. Maybe that's always true. But I was just at the National Eucharistic Congress, and it was just a stunningly beautiful moment in the life of the Catholic Church in the country, and just so centered on our Lord's presence in the Eucharist. And I met so many guys that had never heard of us before, which actually filled me with a lot of hope. Like, okay,
Yeah.
we got some room to run. But I think struggles early on. I mean, for one, I was just kind of embarrassed to start something. As Catholics, we're an institutional people. Secularly, there's all kinds of baggage and skepticism towards institutions today, on every side of every aisle. Basically, we're really skeptical of our institutions. The problem with that, as a Catholic, is that the Church is Christ's institution, and it's His bride. And we come into contact with Him fully through the hierarchy, through the sacramental life of the Church, through communion with this institution, right? So this was just ingrained upon my mind in college. Was like, as Catholics, we're an institutional people, and the vast majority of us should spend our days seeking to bring renewal, to our Catholic institutions, so many of which are in need of deep renewal today. So I'd say, part of it for me was just like, oh man, I got to start something, and feeling somewhat insecure about that. Especially early on, it was not obvious to me that I had a job at all. I still went full time on it, even though I did, wasn't making anything in the beginning, kind of spending everything I had to try to get it up. And I remember actually meeting my wife, who would become my wife, her family. And I was like, actually, at the time, I didn't really know if I had a job. And I was so insecure about it. And I met her dad, and I was like, oh my gosh, don't ask me too many questions about what I'm working on. Because when you say things like, oh, I'm going to bring freedom to God's men, it's like, what does that mean? Like what, and who are you?
Yeah.
And so anyway, I meet him, and come to find out, my wife's family is super entrepreneurial, and he had put his entire retirement at the age of 55 on a new company, which has turned out to do very well. But
Wow.
he's a risker too. And anyway, anyway, I'm in a dream scenario with marrying into that family. And so I'd just say some of it's just overcoming your own insecurities. And I'd say, I can be a little bit hesitant with people who are like, oh man, I want to go start a Catholic thing. How do I do what you did? It's like, well, that wasn't really my starting orientation. It's really something I felt called to do, invited to do. And when I tried to run away a couple of times, it didn't work out, and I lost all my peace in it. So I think for me, at the heart of like Catholic entrepreneurship is the contemplative life, and just allowing God to transform you internally, body, mind, and soul, and then just respond in love as generously as you can. And for me, this was a part of my a part of my journey apparently. And just trying to kind of stay faithful to what's in front of me, as long as, it is in front of me, to continue to work on. So I'd say that's a struggle. I'd say, there was no money. I mean, we were starting from nothing, zero. And, I think there's a way to look at that as a gift, actually, because it put me into a place of constant dependence. It's just very vulnerable, for a long time, and just asking God to, like, hey, if you want this thing, you need to carry me, certainly in a couple, hard moments. And so anyway, I just say that, I'd say from a human perspective, that was a struggle, but from a spiritual perspective, that was just great fruit. That was just a great opportunity, and one that I took advantage of. And and I'd say, maybe the last thing is, like, as things started to kind of bear out and, find traction and all that stuff, one of the things that was so obvious to me was, as hard as I had worked and as much as I had sacrificed, what would start to happen with our work was so far beyond what I had put into it. And so sometimes I hear founders talk about their successes, and it's like, I think they think it's all they're really smart or whatever. And at least for me, I just say it's like, what's gone on has been so far beyond what I ever thought would happen. And, there's such a disproportion between my effort and what has happened, that I just give, the glory to God. And I'm grateful to be able to work on it, years later, and just to continue to improve it too. I think, every stage of a company has different phases, and the struggles are different. There are always struggles. But I never forget, just how vulnerable, how dependent I was, and just how unlikely it all was to happen. And so oftentimes, actually, especially when I'm in something serious at work that I'm really engaged in, I'm just like, man, this is cool. I get to do this today, and I just am very grateful to get to spend my 9 to 5 working on the apostolate. And I know many others would love to be able to do that with their full-time work and can't yet. So that's something I never take for granted.
Has there been any like major turning points in the life of Exodus 90 that you would say are like breakthrough moments where you're like, oh my gosh, this is something like super practical, like other Catholic entrepreneurs might be able to take something from in their own ventures? Like anything stick out?
Yeah. I'd say a couple like inflection points for us, and I'm not sure how relevant they are to others, to be honest with you. I think one of the things to be really careful, as a founder, as a Catholic founder, is just like, no one knows what you're supposed to do. Okay. I can't tell you what to do. And that's not a relativism. That's like a truth, because, like most professionals, like a doctor or a lawyer or a construction worker, they're paid to do a job and to tell you the truth. And as a founder, if someone could tell you what to do, they would be doing your thing for you, but they're not. And so it's almost, as a founder, like, you're called into an unknown and to kind of co-create with God what you feel called to work on. I think if you're doing it in the vision I'm kind of talking about today. And so I think I'm really hesitant to say, like, okay, do these things,
Right.
and they will work for you, because honestly, only you do. And so one of the things that I try to tell founders all the time is, listen to everyone, read everybody, and ignore everyone at the same time. Because if you just do what they're doing, it's not going to really work. And so I'd say, maybe that's all I want to say on to the question, is just be very open. I think being a Catholic founder is a very humbling thing. I wouldn't say I'm more confident 10 years in than I was when I started. I'm just constantly wrong about all kinds of things. I'm humbled every single day. I'm literally trying to figure out things that I thought we figured out 5 years ago today, actually, before we jumped on this interview. And it's humbling. It's a humbling exercise, to enter into building anything. And I think, but in that space, that's really the right place to build from. And then I would just, again, be open, be humbled, and then just really exercise, like get in touch with what you think and get in
Mm-hmm.
touch with your gut is what I say a lot, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's like, if you have something that starts to work, you can try to look to numbers and you can try to look to data and you can try to look to market research to guide you. And you should be open and receive all that stuff. But everything comes down to human judgment, everything. And I'd say the moments when I've lost touch with what I thought was my gut on something and I just tried to follow the numbers or something, those were always mistakes. So I think my encouragement to any founder listening would be to be open, to read and listen to everyone, and then ignore everything that you're told and just try to figure it out, with God leading you.
I think that's beautiful. What have you learned about recruiting and managing a team? I think that's like a unique challenge specifically for Catholic founders, like especially something like Exodus 90. Any interesting takeaways in that kind of realm of the journey?
Yeah, recruiting is really hard. I mean, in your earliest stage, you're recruiting your friends because they trust you, or they'll give you a chance. And I look back on the guys that joined us the earliest, and I'm filled with the most gratitude for them, because it was just all so unlikely. But as you grow, I mean, two things become important. On the one hand, there's the mission fit, and on the other, there's competence. And both matter a lot. I'd say in Catholic circles, you'll find such an overemphasis on mission fit, and you'll often not hear enough about the importance for competence in whatever it is that you're doing. And I'd say, at least in my experience, both really matter. Obviously, if we were to hire someone not in our ultimate mission and vision and charisms, like we've discerned charisms that we think God has given to our team. If they're not in those, of course, the thing won't be fruitful, and that's what matters the most. But you also need people with skills, to offer you something that you don't have, in order that so that you can improve. So both matter, and I'd say some of my struggles have been, just making sure at the right stage of our company, things have changed a lot over the last almost decade, just making sure we have the right competencies on the inside. And that's hard to judge, but both matter. And at the same time, I'd also say maybe the other encouraging thing is this is not something that any founder that I know has done perfectly. I'd say probably the founder I trust the most and follow the most closely, because he has the most experience, ultimately thinks that hiring, like you don't know if someone will work out.
Okay.
Even with all the relevant experience, even if with all the right mission fit, you don't know. And sometimes people surprise you. They do really work out. And then other times it seems like obvious that this person will work out, and then they don't. And so, again, I think it's one of those things that's just humbling, in that I'm learning as I go, with this, but people issues are really challenging, especially in a small company. It's like there's deeper relationships than just work, and that can make it hard, even if that's a strength, it can also make it challenging as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, those are just a couple thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. What's been like one of the coolest things that's happened, or craziest stories you've heard, whether it's people doing Exodus 90 or just maybe internally in the company since you started? What's something that like sticks out when you think about your past?
Gosh, coolest thing. Well, I'd say, I mean, the thing that keeps me going are the testimonies, and I mean, the testimonies that flow in on an almost daily basis would be like, one would be enough for a career moment, honestly, and so I think, I don't know, just that Exodus has resonated with so many men has been just really surprising, really cool. Makes me believe there's a lot more men we could reach, actually, than we've reached up to this point. I think, and maybe another thing is, so one real misconception of Catholics, like kind of in the echo chamber of the Catholic Church about Exodus 90, is that it's for like the Navy SEALs of Catholics. And this is dead wrong. And if you ever just spent any time with a regular fraternity, you would realize this. I mean, Exodus guys come in all shapes and sizes, and some of them are like really mature in the spiritual life. Other guys are just kind of figuring it out, and they just got invited into a fraternity. And about 20% of our guys are not Catholics, okay? And 5% of our guys don't practice a religion. And so this is what makes Exodus, I think, really cool, is that it's like there's real evangelization that goes on in these fraternities. And there are, in addition to the vocations that get answered every year, which is really humbling and cool, there's also guys that are just like open again to the tradition of the Catholic Church in a way that they were not before, and would not have been if you had just invited them to mass. I mean, there's something really special about a fraternity, of men who are earnestly seeking the Lord together, in humility, and that disposes guys to maybe reconsider, the church or Christianity just because of their experience.
Right. Is there anything coming up for you in Exodus 90 here in the near future? The things you're working on, things you're excited about that you want to talk about?
Gosh, so for us, the biggest things that we've been working on are kind of like our programs that happen, beyond the 90. So Exodus 90 is definitely our biggest time of the year. Obviously, it starts 90 days to Easter. This year, the start date is January 20th. So, check it out if you're interested. But we've been working on our programming all year round now that kind of helps guys to build personal plans of life for where they're at, and also helps, them to continue their formation in the faith and in their life as a man beyond just the 90. So I'd say those this year have been far more successful than any year in the past, which we're really excited about. And our next big launch is actually coming up mid-August, August 15th. It's called St. Michael's Lent. So St. Michael's Lent is it's like a summertime Lent, and it was made popular by St. Francis in the Middle Ages. And it's a tradition I knew about as a boy and was really inspired by. It was during the St. Michael's Lent of, I believe, 1224, that St. Francis actually received the stigmata, the wounds of Christ in his flesh. And, ultimately, he had a profound devotion to St. Michael and to the angels bit. And so we're really just trying to refocus men, as we emerge from kind of the summertime haze, as enjoyable as it can be, into the invisible realities that we believe, as Catholics. So my favorite saint is St. John Henry Newman. And one of the things that he taught really throughout his whole life was just that what we can see with our eyes is not even half the equation of reality. Invisible reality is far more real than what we can just, the material things that we see. And so during St. Michael's Lent, we really try to refocus our bodies, minds, and souls on this truth, and take up a bit of prayer, asceticism, and fraternity to kind of enter more deeply into our devotion to St. Michael. And so anyway, we'd welcome anyone to join us for that coming up here on August 15th.
Definitely. What's your final message to other Catholic entrepreneurs, those that want to start something, those that feel called to do something?
Yeah, I'd say, stay rooted in the contemplative life. That's what matters the most. There's a book called The Soul of the Apostolate, and it's by Dom Chattard, I think is his name. And it's like a terrifying book, because it's like, basically, if you are bearing any kind of fruit, it is ultimately Christ in you. And, I think the whole book is about how, basically Jesus first in John's gospel, without me, you can do nothing. And so I think there's really I just say to stay so centered, maybe especially if you start to experience some kind of momentum in what you're doing. Remember that it's, God's work. You can place a lot of burden on him, and, if it's his will, he'll respond. And, but then to just stay so centered in that place that, at least fruit that will endure, ultimately is the work of Christ in us. So I think that would be just my encouragement, to stay there. I've tried to stay there, and I've tried to center our whole team there, as well. And then lastly, it's like, hey, I mean, there's no playbook, there's no roadmap, and just trust yourself and rely on God and figure it out. And if it's his will, it'll happen. And if it's not, it won't, And I think having that, so one of our charisms is holy detachment. And so
Right.
that's just the spirit I try to live all the time with Exodus stuff. It's like, you know, if it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, that's okay too. You know, God's will is his love for us. And everything is working together for our greatest good because we're children of God. So I think when you're in that place, you can actually take a lot of risk. You know, you can be magnanimous, you know, practice that virtue, and ask great things from God. You know, if you're really detached, it's when we're attached and possessed and self-centered, you know, and just trying to make things work for ourselves, that I think we can get really really lost, really backwards, and just outside of the apostolate, you know, of really being part of Christ's mission to bring salvation to the world.
Beautiful words, Jamie. I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate this conversation, learning from you. Just thank you so much, and just many, many blessings for you and Exodus 90, your team. Keep up the great work, and I'll be praying for you all.
Mitch, thank you. Yeah, blessings on you, you know, the show here, and all the founders that could stumble into this in the future. And if I can ever be of any help, yeah, feel free to ping me, and
Thank you.
I'll do whatever I can.
Will do. Appreciate it. You have a great rest of your day.
Hey, you too. God bless.
God bless. To learn more about Exodus 90, check out the special link in the show notes. get.exodus90.com/thecatholicentrepreneur.